I want to take a look at a monster. NVIDIA stock. NVIDIA is a company. There's always a certain hype train. Like if you're going to follow the crypto market, you're going to see just how the price is being not manipulated, but driven as far as hype versus what's real, what's not. Well, NVIDIA is real. I mean, right here, $33.2 billion estimate. That's pretty damn big. I mean, if you could see where they were at the end of Q4 in 23 versus where they're at now, that is such an exponential increase. They even had a dip here where I'm sure a lot of stockholders were just a little worried about that. 33.2 billion Q3 estimate. Well, they beat it by a couple $billion, a couple billion big smackaroos. That is crazy. But why? Well, if we look down here, largely driven by the data centers. Enterprise companies are starting to really get more mature in their understanding of artificial intelligence, where the ROI is, why you would need to be on-prem, which on-premise as far as having an actual data center owned by your company somewhere, or something that's called a co-location facility where you kind of just rent out space and run your infrastructure. Because the big thing with a lot of this, power hungry. A lot of companies don't even have the ability to run this infrastructure because you just can't get enough power. These racks that are running these GPUs are 2, 3, 4, in the case of the Blackwell, 5x beyond what a lot of data centers are used to. And you power these things on, the local utility is gonna be like, what the hell are you trying to do to us? And I think, as you know, any sort of community where you're draining a lot of power, not gonna be too happy for you. But companies are figuring this out. Why purchase versus go and rent on cloud or some sort of other like platform as a service? And that's what we're seeing, companies being more mature. But a big majority of this is still largely driven through the purchases by the big hyperscalers. I mean, 100,000 of these NVIDIA GPUs are in a Memphis facility for Elon Musk's X, but there's always the more traditional. You got the AWS, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, which is OCI, Azure, Google Cloud Platform that are highly consuming a lot of these. The H200s just came out, which the H100s have been kind of leading the way of the compute and like the go-to as far as how can I get the best performance available. Here in Austin, Texas, we've got the University of Texas, Austin, hook 'em horns, that they have 600 of these running and helping a lot of the academic research power these. They're just been the creme de la creme. Now we got the H200s that are actually being priced at the same of the H100s that are now giving much better performance. And unfortunately for companies like AMD, who recently came out with their MI300s, the literature that was coming out was comparing performance to the H100s. I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers out there, but anyway, the top of the line AMD MI300s are more comparable to the H200s. And I think a lot of that testing, like ML Perf and what they usually do, hasn't come out yet as far as what that more apples to apples comparison for performance looks like. But just know NVIDIA is just, they're ahead of the game. I do think AMD, more likely than Intel, will create more parity in the market and take more market share as, again, people become more mature for a reason that I'll talk about later in this video. But NVIDIA is the real deal. So they came out with a press release covering them blowing out the water. Jensen Huang is, you know, elated. I'm sure he's dominating the AI computing market. But I just want to like cover some of the stuff. Like, where's the stuff being sold into? Of course, they announced the availability of their H200s recently, and all of the cloud providers are already on top of it, all the ones that I named. But some cool ones: launched Denmark's largest sovereign AI supercomputer. They got over 1,500 of these H100s sitting there. So unfortunately for Denmark, they don't even have the latest and greatest. But I'm sure, depending on where they are in the build, that they'll end up getting some of those H200s in there. A lot of people getting on the Blackwell platform. These things are so power hungry. You know, there's a little flavor for everybody depending on the use cases that companies are looking at today and in the near future. And I would say a majority of these enterprise customers, not the hyperscalers, are going to be probably more aligned with the needs of an H200. But I'm sure some are going to go for that Blackwell as far as the performance. But these things are so power hungry. Revealed that cloud leaders in India, Japan, and Indonesia are building AI infrastructure with NVIDIA. Accelerated xAI's Colossus supercomputer, the 100,000 of them, these sitting in some sort of data center in Memphis, Tennessee. What else they have? If we skip down here, we can look at more. Okay, gaming. Still got the 3090 Ti running all my local AI and ML workloads on that machine behind me. But what's really cool, I'm sure all of the R&D that they get to reinvest on the data center side should give them some learnings to help improve price to performance for their gaming line. So I think a lot of us are going to be very excited to see what that is for us on the consumer side. Now the software. I don't think anyone's really looking at NVIDIA as a software company, or how many people even know that they have a software line. And that's no fault to NVIDIA. They're learning on the go, experiencing some hiccups, I'm sure, on the software side, hiring developers. It's a new part of their business. Hardware side, Microsoft, they've largely been on the software side, not investing a lot on the hardware side beyond consumer grade laptops and whatnot and business workstations. So why? Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. One, getting some sort of ecosystem. I always look at NVIDIA as the Apple and AMD Intel as the Android. NVIDIA is investing a lot. How can we get consumers on the enterprise side, on the research side, to get from their ideation, this is really cool, I like using this, to let me use it? There's a lot in between. Where the workload's going to sit. It's going to be on cloud. It's going to be at a colo. It's going to be on premise. Can we run this infrastructure locally? And there's a lot of reasons for that too. Whether it's price, like cloud's going to be too expensive, availability of the computing instances where you want to actually reserve an instance on cloud is going to be incredibly expensive in some instances. And so it probably makes more sense. But then do we have the power availability to do so? Do we have the funding availability to pay this out of pocket, whether it's a lease or a loan? And so there's a lot of those discussions, but then building on top of it, building these containers, having people that know Kubernetes to run, or MLOps to know how these workloads are being ran on top of the infrastructure. There's a lot of resources that companies probably traditionally didn't have that they now have to invest in, all the way to the ability to use the software like NVIDIA Omniverse, which I think is really cool. This announcement. Foxconn is using digital twins and industrial AI built on NVIDIA Omniverse to bring online faster 3 factories. This is really cool. I think, to me, this is the most interesting use of AI, where if you're building a facility, you can run simulations within a digital twin environment, a physical replica within a virtual environment. And if a change order is coming, run it within the environment to see if there's going to be any hiccups, any issues, any cost savings that we can maybe alter our plan. Layouts for hospitals, or even like fast food chains where you can, if you introduce a new product, can you run fluid simulations with there, see how the workers are going to interact before deploying it, changing the layout for customers within any sort of retail environment. All this stuff is really cool. Manufacturing, laying out the whole supply chain and running simulations. And on top of that, using something like NVIDIA Isaac to help build robotics. That is this whole ecosystem that's for Project Groot. Where do I have it here? I have it here. That NVIDIA is building out, making it easier to deploy what's needed for the people that actually just want to work on it, rather than the whole between understanding the hardware, software, the whole middle layer, all the way to just let me get my hands on it. Like a molecular biologist is not going to care about anything on the back end. I just need the front end access to do my job. And so NVIDIA has things like their neural inference microservices, something that's, you don't have to build out the whole container. You don't have to maintain it. You can deploy ththese NIMs on top of the NVIDIA infrastructure. And, they don't do that out of the goodness of their heart. Maybe in some aspects, it just makes sense from a customer experience perspective to just make it easier to use. but then you get locked in. Again, it's like that Apple ecosystem. If you're using NIMs and you don't have these containers built out where you would have to do on AMD or Intel infrastructure, then you're stuck. You can't go, like if AMD releases some sort of interesting hardware that you want to use, you can't copy paste it over there. There's a whole different parallel processing platform, like AMD uses ROCm versus like the CUDA platform. So that's where it gets kind of messy. I think for the most part, customers don't care, but as there is this trend of more sophistication, more investment, and we become more mature in this market, it could introduce a little bit of parity between someone like an AMD and an NVIDIA. This is their announcement of the microservices earlier this year, which was a huge deal. And then, of course, you got the NVIDIA Blackwell architecture that is just an absolute monster. Who needs this? That'll be up to the use case and the funding and everything else, power availability. But this is the absolute monster. This Grace Blackwell 200 NVL 72. I think it's like 1,000. What is it? It's a power hungry monster is what it is. They're not even going to have it right in your face because, I mean, it is performing, what is it, 2.2x? I think they had, excuse me, ML Perf in here. Here we go. Announced that the Blackwell debuted on ML Perf training, completed all tests, and delivered up to 2.2 times performance gains on large language model benchmarks. That's fast. If you've got a lot of people pinging a system, need low latency, need the ability to continually leverage LLMs, this could be your guy if you've got it, the power availability that is. So NVIDIA, maybe there's a little bit, if you look at like the stock versus actual cash on hand and earnings, but there's a lot of validity in what they're doing. I will be interested to see how tariffs potentially affect it, causing supply chain issues versus the domestic semiconductor manufacturing of all the investments that are being done here, including Austin. I think Samsung's got a multi-billion-dollar facility right up the street from me that they're investing in. How that's going to affect things. So absolute monster. Absolute monster.